Hey, you guys, welcome to the stream. My first ever live stream uh, that I'm holding. Hold on a second. See if that's any better. Whatever is good enough. Yeah, welcome to my first ever live stream that I'm doing. This is just a new way to test things out. Usually, the way I do things is that I make videos based on whatever idea I have in mind, whatever topic it may be. So this time I'm just going to try something new. I'm going to basically maybe hold a live stream once every week to basically answer any questions that you guys have in real time, just to see how things go, because making videos for me is kind of tedious. I'd rather just do it live and answer you guys' questions as they come in real time, and that also gives me more opportunities to interact with members of my audience in a more authentic way, right? So you guys send in your questions and I just answer them immediately, and I can also elaborate on anything that you guys might not understand. So yeah, this is my first ever live stream. If you're here, welcome to the stream. Welcome. It's my first ever live stream, so again, bear with me if there's any inconsistencies or nervousness. It's just part of the process. And yeah, we're just going to try this out, and hopefully as time goes on, things get better. So the first two topics that I want to talk about for this live stream comes from one of you guys, from the viewers, which is the first one is going to be on feelings of unworthiness, which I attribute to kind of feelings of inferiority. And so the best way, how do you basically get over these feelings of feeling unworthy, right? You want to do something, but then you feel like you're unworthy, right? You don't feel like you have what it takes to do the task, or basically there's a voice in your mind that's preventing you from doing what you want to do. And this is what you know as the voice of unworthiness, the voice of inferiority. And the best example of this I can give is imagine that you are playing a video game, right? And there's an enemy that's in front of you. This enemy is much larger than you, right? He's bulging with muscles. He's huge. He looks like he could slap you across the room like a fly, right? And meanwhile, all you're doing is you're playing a character in that video game, right? Your character is, this short, puny human compared to this giant hulking orc. And your puny human, only thing he can do is he's really good at fighting, right? He's wielding a sword, and he's going to take on this hulk of an opponent. Now, in real life, if you were to encounter this situation, immediately feelings of inferiority would come in. And this stems from you looking at the differences between you, which is your main character, and the opponent that you're about to face. And so you may look at things like, for example, he's got huge bulging muscles, right? I don't. He's 12 feet tall. I'm not. He's sitting in this grand palace chamber, overlooking his entire domain. Meanwhile, I have nothing, right? I've just traveled from 5,000 miles from the countryside, going through arduous tasks and tests in order to get to where I am. He didn't have to do that. And so in your mind, you just keep coming with all of these reasons, all of these excuses all of these ideas as to why you can't take the task on. You look at all the differences between you, your opponent, and then you say, wow, he has so many things that I don't. He's got so many things that are going on for him that I don't, right? He's got muscles. He's tall. He's rich. He's got a palace. He's got a domain. What do I have, right? I just have a small sword and my own fighting skills. Now, again, this is an example of a video game. In a video game, you completely control your character. And so these thoughts don't even come into your mind. You see the enemy, right, in a video game, the first thing you do is, I'm going to beat the crap out of him. You don't care how small you are. You don't care what your abilities are. You just go for it, right? With all the confidence that you can muster, you just go for it. And these thoughts and feelings of unworthiness never even arise. And that's because in that moment, when you're playing the video game, you become someone else, right? You are no longer the person sitting behind your computer screen playing the video game. You have now immersed yourself, your consciousness, into the character that you wish to embody, which is the character in the video game. And so all those thoughts and ideals that you have in your mind about how inferior you are, they no longer exist, because you are no longer the person that you are in real life, in your human body, the person behind the screen. So you take on the personality of your video game character. But the most interesting thing about this is that your video game character does not actually have a personality. It is not a real tangible object. It is not a real tangible entity. It is just that you yourself, as the player, you are projecting the qualities that you would like to see in yourself onto your character. And so in the video game, you may act completely different from how you will act in real life, right? You will take on gigantic enemies that can slap you around and punch you across the room without any afterthought as to what the consequences could be. Right? You're not worried about how, in the video game, you're not worried about how you're going to get hurt. You're not worried about whether or not you're going to fail. To you, it's like a fun game. It's a fun experience where you get to try something new and put yourself to the test. And so when you approach it from that kind of mindset, the mindset that life is just a video game, and the task in front of you is just yet another challenge or a quest or a small hiccup in the road on your way to greatness, then all those feelings of unworthiness, all those thoughts in your mind, and all those beliefs that you have about yourself just completely disappear, because they no longer exist. Those thoughts and feelings exist in the real world, where you are attached to yourself in the real world. So this comes basically from the kind of trauma that you have from when you were a kid. So when you're growing up, you may have been told that, you can't do certain things, or like, that's not the proper way to like do something. Thank you, Librarian Girl, for your support. Welcome to the stream. It is my first ever live stream. So it's great to have you in here, and I hope that it is helpful to you. Be sure to let me know if there's any other topics that you'd like to talk about, that you'd like me to talk about. I'm going to be going over inferiority and the flow state in this session, and maybe one more. But yeah, back to what I was saying with inferiority and your background trauma, right? It stems from your childhood. All these voices in your head and these feelings of unworthiness, they stem from your childhood. And that is why when you're playing, let's say, a video game, you don't have feelings of unworthiness because the character that you're playing in the video game does not have any sort of background trauma. It has no past. You've just created the character, and so it has no personality. It has no life of its own, right? It's basically the minute you create the character from day one, that is its entire history. So it's a completely blank slate. Whereas in real life, right, you exist. You don't exist on day one, right? You have a whole background history of who you are, what your traumas are, the people you've interacted with, how they've yelled at you, or all the scenarios in which you failed in all the scenarios at which you failed in the past. They come back to haunt you. And so that's why you feel inferior or unworthy. And so when there is an opponent or a challenge or a task in real life, instead of facing it as you would in a video game with no afterthought of what the outcome is, you start to sabotage yourself and you say, oh, maybe I can't do it. He looks kind of big. He might beat me up. I might get hurt. I might fail. I might lose money or whatever. And so that's where all these feelings come from, which is your background, history, your childhood, and all that kind of trauma that adds up. Hey, 𝗙𝗍, welcome to the live stream. It's great to have you here with us. Yeah, as I was saying, this is my first ever live stream, so we're just gonna try this out and see how it goes. And in the future, if things go well, I'll hold more of these, maybe once a week or something, to kind of answer any questions you guys have in real time. And that should also make it easier for me to kind of like explain anything if you guys don't understand anything in real time. Yeah, so that's my perspective on inferiority. It basically stems from your background history, right? From your childhood. And so if you're looking to overcome those feelings, typically psychology states that you need to go back into your childhood and examine where all those moments in your life happen, which lead to you feeling those feelings of inferiority. But since we're going with the video game example, the way I guess I would do it is just realize that you have no past, right? Someone without a past has no background trauma. Your video game character has no past. He has no recollection of what has happened in other video games. He has no recollection of what happened in your life in the past. He's a completely blank slate with no personality, no memory of anything besides what he already knows that has happened in the game. And so if you want to overcome those feelings of inferiority, just realize that they never really existed in the first place. The person who's creating those feelings is you for some reason. We don't know what that reason is. Could be to avoid pain, right? So back to the video game example, if you're fighting a 12-foot huge orc with muscles, one of the biggest reasons why you might not want to fight him in real life is because he's going to hurt you really badly. So that fear of getting hurt is going to hold you back from doing what you want to do, which is beating him up for money or something like that, right? Again, going back to the video game example. But then in a video game, right, if you fail, there is no real punishment for failing. If you fail, you can always try again. If you get knocked around the room, you're not going to feel the pain. If you lose the battle, you're not going to be a laughingstock. Your reputation is not going to be ruined. Why? Because you have no reputation. You have no pain receptors. And you have no sense of failure. It's just get up and try again. So it's not that we need to change anything in order to not feel these negative feelings that we feel. It is that we need to stop creating emotions that don't serve us. Because innately, each and every single one of us has the ability to succeed in life or do what it is that we want to do. If this was not true, then let's say we're playing a video game, the first thing that you would do when you encounter a challenge in the game is that you would quit the game. But then we don't do that. In fact, we take it as a challenge. We take it as something that's fun, right? We'll play the game over and over. We will keep trying until, even as we fail, until we succeed. You have to ask yourself, where does that determination come from, right? It certainly does not come from the video game character, because again, your video game character has no sense of life without you at the controls, controlling them. And so you have to say that that sense of determination comes from you. It comes from within you. It's always been there. You have to realize that. It comes from within you. And that's why so many people love to play video games. It's not because it's a form of, well, it is a form of entertainment, but basically to me, it's like a way for you to project your innermost, greatest qualities onto something else, and for you to see them in your own, for you to be able to see them in an external environment, which you can't necessarily do in real life because of certain limitations like pain, and the trauma that we encounter in our background from our past childhood. So yeah, that is my take on inferiority. And then now with moving on to flow state, which is being in like this state of, so what is the flow state? What is wu-wei in the way that I understand? So the best way to explain flow state is that it is like a river, right? A river flows, the water in the river flows without any sort of impediment or obstacles that prevents it from reaching its destination. So let's say, for example, that the river wants to flow from a mountain into the ocean, and there is a path from the mountain to the ocean. If there is no obstacles inside the river, then the flow is very good. The flow is clear, and the speed in which the water flows is going to be consistent. It's going to be fast, and everything is going to be moving along very nicely. When obstacles are present in this river, then the flow gets blocked. The flow gets impeded. The efficiency of the water that flows from the mountain into the ocean is going to be slower because it has to move around this obstacle that is in the way. So you can imagine that this obstacle could be like a giant boulder, right? That's kind of like plugging up the river and slowing it down. Taking this example to real life, you could say that this boulder is, again, your beliefs, your emotions, your mindset as to how something should be or how the river should flow. And because humans are naturally in a flow state, right? You want to look at babies from when they're young, right? They act in a way that's like, I don't care about the world, right? They just act. They just exist, and they behave in a way which is completely foreign to how we as adults understand them, right? So babies, if you want an example of someone that is in the flow state and how you can kind of like imitate them, just look at a baby and look at what they do. A baby is in a flow state. It is unhindered. It has no boulders in its stream. It just goes about and lives life the way it wants to. And it does not think about a future outcome, which I think is the most important thing to look at when it comes to examining whether or not you are in the flow state. So the reason why most of us can't get into the flow state is because we're so worried about an outcome that we allow that to prevent us from just doing what it is that we naturally do. So babies naturally, right? They are very curious. They like to explore their environment. They will get into things that they shouldn't get into. They will literally, poop in a diaper and then pick it up, maybe even eat it if you're not watching it. Because, again, that is curiosity. That is flow state. That is what comes natural to them. Now, as to a human, since you're an adult, you're not going to do that, right? Because you know that, your poop is kind of dirty and you probably don't want that anywhere near your mouth. That in itself, that knowledge, that belief is a boulder in the stream that is preventing you from accessing the flow state. Because you create these beliefs and restrictions as to what is allowed and what is not. You can call these rules for how you want to live your life. Rules that either we create for ourselves or they're rules that society has imposed upon us. So for example, you can't smoke in public places. You can't, randomly punch someone on the street. You have to pay money in order to leave a grocery store with items. These are all rules and restrictions. And each and every single rule and restriction that you pick up as you live your life is just another pebble that is impeding you from accessing the flow state. Because in the background of your mind, these things are always going on as to how you should behave, how you should or should not do something. And it prevents you from getting to the flow state because you're more worried about what you should not do instead of what you can do. Again, you're worried about a future outcome, right? If I do not follow the rules, then I'm going to get in trouble. If I do not follow the rules, I'm going to encounter a negative situation, which is then going to cause me pain. For a baby, they don't know what pain is yet, right? They can eat poop. They put it in their mouth, and the minute they put it in their mouth, they're like, oh, this tastes disgusting. They might spit it out or they might swallow it. Again, because they have no concept of what limitations and rules are. They think that, okay, maybe if I swallow the poop, then it'll taste good, which is what a baby might do. But then as an adult, you're like, oh, this tastes terrible. I'm going to spit it out. So you can kind of say, if you want to simplify it, the flow state is simply how much you know. It is about knowledge. And the more knowledge you have, the more impediments you're going to have that are preventing you from accessing the flow state, which is why they say something like, was it the happiest people in the world are the dumbest because they know absolutely nothing. And that is a core teaching of spirituality and Buddhism, right? When it comes to meditation, which is quieting the mind, putting these thoughts to rest so that you don't have any sort of thoughts or beliefs holding you back. Because that's all it is. The only thing that's preventing you from living in every single moment and enjoying every single moment is the thoughts that you have. It's the beliefs that you have. I'll give you a perfectly good example, which is this live stream. I could be worried about how I'm going to show up on the live stream. I could be worried about whether or not my audience is going to enjoy what I'm going to say. I could worry about how I look. I could be worried about the lighting in the background, the boxes, the scenery, whether or not people are even going to show up to the live stream. These are all things that I could be worried about. But then I chose not to worry about them. And then that allows me to get into the flow state to do what I do best, which is just providing value to my audience and being able to explain these complicated concepts in a simplified way, right? That is what I enjoy doing. That is, to me, that is my flow state. I don't want to worry about these things because worrying about them does not allow me to get into the flow state. And so if I'm able to just kind of focus on the things that I want to say instead of what I don't want to say, then it's much easier for me to get into the flow state because all of a sudden these rules and restrictions don't come into place. So the biggest impediments, I'd say, come from you looking at your external environment and what others are doing, and then looking at yourself and you're saying that the way I do things is not the same way that other people do things, and so you're comparing yourself to them, and then those beliefs and then those restrictions and that mindset stops you from getting to the flow state, because you are doing something different from how everyone else does things. And we have been taught since a very young age that we need to, what's that word? Compromise. Like, we need to basically do what everyone else is doing, right? We can't do our own thing. We can't be ourselves, because society is not going to accept that. And that is what prevents us from getting into the flow state, because we are so worried about fulfilling the standards that society has imposed upon us instead of doing our own thing. But if you look at history, if you look at examples of some of the greatest artists in history, like Picasso and Michael Van Gogh and anyone that has ever done anything great, right? They never, the way they were great, the way they were known to be great is because they did things the way, their own way. They didn't do things that others did, right? So you could say that as flow state. Flow state is basically doing what comes natural to you. And the way that you can do that is by silencing all the thoughts that are in your head, silencing all the beliefs that you have about yourself, and all the rules and limitations that society has placed upon you. So it basically means cutting yourself off from your external environment, and then asking yourself, how would I behave if I was completely alone? That's an example of flow state, which is why, to me and many introverts, they like to spend time alone, because that is the only way that they can discover their true authentic self without any of the distractions around them from their family, from their friends, from society. Because when you're completely alone, all of a sudden, all the beliefs, all the pebbles in your stream of flow, all of those are completely gone, because you no longer have to cater to anyone but yourself. And when you only have to cater to yourself, which is, it sounds like selfishness basically, but yes, when you are completely 100% selfish, then you're in the flow state, which is actually very hard to do. It's actually very difficult to be selfish. And I'll give you a perfectly good example of this, okay? Let's say that you want to walk from your house to the mall and you want to visit a certain store. As you're walking to the mall, right? So if you're going to be 100% selfish, you're going to say, I'm going to walk from my house to the mall. I'm not going to care about anyone or anything in my environment at all. I'm just going to care about myself and getting myself to the store. That's it. If you can do that in a 100% selfish way, then that is flow. But the minute you step outside your house, you are doomed to fail, because you have to cater to your external environment immediately. The first thing you're going to encounter, the first example, is you have to cross the street probably, right? And when you're crossing the street, there's going to be cars. There's going to be traffic lights. So instantly, you're already not in a state of flow, because you have to deal with traffic. You have to deal with other people. You have to deal with the rules that society has imposed upon us. Walk on, the pedestrian walk sign. Don't walk when the red hand is flashing, right? That is a rule. That is a pebble. That prevents you from getting the state of flow. If you're in a flow state, you probably just run across the road, not giving a crap about whether or not the cars see you, which is what babies do if you observe them, because they have no sense of danger. But again, the fact that you have to make yourself aware that cars exist means that you're looking outside your internal environment. You're not being 100% selfish in that moment, because now you're like, oh, I need to think about others. I need to not run across the road. Otherwise, the driver is going to get annoyed at me. And so instantly you're not in the flow state anymore, because you're no longer being 100% selfish, which is why I say being 100% selfish is next to impossible. As long as people are around you, as long as you live in society. Because whether or not you like it, you have to allow yourself to be subject under certain rules, like crossing the traffic light. It's only when you're alone, let's say in nature, in the forest, and there's no one around to disturb you, then you can be 100% selfish. And I also want to elaborate this, which is a lot of people think that being selfish is bad. That is yet another imposed belief that society has put upon us to make us feel unworthy. Because they think that being selfish is a bad thing. It's not, and I can prove it. Which is when let's say you're in a forest alone, you're enjoying your own company, you're just watching the world around you. In that moment, you're being selfish because the only thing in that moment that you want to do is just to enjoy the beauty of nature around you. And if you're in that moment where you're not being disturbed by anything, most likely you're going to feel an overwhelming sense of peace and serenity. So then you have to think, if I'm being completely selfish in that moment, but I feel this overwhelming sense of peace and serenity, is selfishness really a bad thing? Don't think about it from a logical perspective. Think about it from an emotional perspective, which is you focus on the emotion that you're feeling in that moment, the feeling of peace and serenity, and then you attribute it to what the definition of a term or a word is, which is the word selfishness. So then now, if you're doing this from an emotional standpoint, you're attributing the word selfishness to the emotions of peace and serenity. All of a sudden, selfishness does not seem like a bad thing. It seems like a good thing. It seems like something that you would want more of in your life, right? You want to experience more of those emotions in your life. You want to experience more selfishness. But then the minute you try to share this ideal with anyone else outside of you, they will start berating you. They will start talking down to you, right? Other people will be like, you want to live the rest of your life in a selfish manner? Like, what is wrong with you? Get off the program, right? You have to do what everyone else is doing, which is suffering and caring for everyone else. You can't just run across the street. You're going to kill everyone. You're going to kill us all. And that is because, again, that is impeding, that is stepping away from the boundary of selfishness into the world of selflessness. You are sharing your ideals with everyone else because you're trying to get them to accept your ideas. Which is kind of a paradox since I'm holding this live stream and explaining my insights, but I think you can kind of get it the way I'm explaining it. But basically, if you're being completely selfish, then it's much easier to get into a state of flow because you can better understand what flow is, right? Which is just being myself, not being anyone else around me. When you have to think about the needs of others, then you're no longer just being yourself, right? You're also being a part of them because a part of them wants you to behave a certain way. A part of them wants you to look both ways before you cross the street. And then so that takes away from who you are internally, and that kind of distracts you. And whenever there's a distraction in your life, then you can't get into the state of flow because you're being distracted by because then now your focus, instead of focusing on where you want to be and the things that you want to do, instead of focusing on that, which helps you to get into the flow state, you're focused on the distractions. And because you're focused on the distractions, your attention and your energy starts to go that way towards the distraction, and that takes away from the flow state. It's like if I said, Focus on the feeling of happiness. Focus on the feeling of joy. Focus on the feeling of peace. And then I submerge you in an environment that is conducive to those emotions. So I'll put you in a forest where the sun is shining. There's, birds chirping around you. There is autumn leaves just, fluttering around you. There's a nice breeze blowing through the forest. In that kind of setting, it's very easy for you to focus on those positive emotions. Now, let's say I put you in the middle of a really busy city with lots of traffic and foot traffic, and everyone is just yelling and talking on their cell phone, shoving each other around and saying like, hey, you idiot, get off the road. Like, you're not supposed to be there. I put you in that really noisy and annoying environment, and I tell you, focus on the emotions of peace and serenity and joy. You are going to struggle. Why? Because there's tons of distractions around you. And all of those are going to take away from your attention. All of those are going to take away your focus and distract you, which is why it's going to be very difficult for you to get into a flow state or to just completely be yourself, which is selfishness. So to summarize it, if you want to get into the flow state, you need to be in a state of 100% selfishness. This doesn't mean that you have to get into an isolated environment like nature. You can also do it while just you're doing your tasks, right? So one way, most people, when they think of flow state, it's because they are trying to perform at their best, right? So let's say that you are trying to write an essay or cook dinner. Okay? So let's say you're trying to cook dinner and you want to do it from a state of flow. How that looks like is everything just happens naturally without any sort of hiccup. So when I say like hiccup, let's say you take out, let's say, the vegetables from the fridge, you chop them up, and then just as like you're chopping them up, then you turn around and they put them in the stove. It should feel very fluid. It should feel very smooth. It shouldn't feel like you have to stop and think about your actions, right? You should not. Being in a flow state means that everything just happens naturally, smoothly, like water flowing down from a mountain. There's nothing that is impeding the flow of movement. But then the minute you start to feel, and I say feel because this is a very emotional thing, I don't think you can explain flow state in a logical manner. It's something that you have to feel, right? It should feel natural. It should feel as though everything is flowing very smoothly. And when you're not feeling those emotions, that means that something is distracting you from getting to the flow state. Most likely it's the thoughts that are in your mind. So if you're cooking dinner and you're thinking about, I need to make sure that I cook dinner by a certain time, that is going to impede your flow state because, again, you're being distracted. So in order to create a state of flow, in order to live your life in a state of flow, of being present and being happy in every single moment that you come across, you need to, number one, eliminate as many distractions as you can from your environment, as well. And number two, which is, I'd say, arguably even more important, eliminating all the distractions and thoughts that reside in your mind. Because once you can do that, then once you're able to master your mind and all the distractions that are in it, then the distractions in your external environment will be easier to deal with. But if, let's say, you're just starting out as a beginner, it is better to focus on your external environment before you focus on the internal one. When you get good at getting to a state of flow, then you want to actually, for example, monks do, they will, I don't actually know if monks do this, but one of the ways that you can kind of challenge yourself to get into a state of flow is to immerse yourself into a noisy environment and try to maintain your state of peace and isolation. It's like being in a state of Zen, just meditating at a bus stop or something while there's tons of like noise going around you. But you don't really see that happening because, again, your external environment plays a very important role in whether or not you are going to be able to enter a state of flow, which is why you never see monks meditating in the middle of a city. They are always isolated in the mountains where no one is there to disturb them, because they do that for a reason, which is external distractions. So yeah, to just summarize everything that I've said, in terms of inferiority and feelings of unworthiness, they stem from your background and your childhood trauma. And as long as you live in the past, then those feelings of unworthiness are going to pop up. But if you live life from the perspective of, let's say a video game character who has no background history at all, they have no fears, they have no beliefs, then you'll be able to do basically whatever you want without any afterthought as to what the consequences are. And when it comes to flow state, it's simply clearing your mind of any thoughts that may be preventing you from getting to your desired outcome. Because every thought is a distraction that takes away your energy and your attention and prevents you from doing the things that you want to do. So yeah, I think that is it for this live stream. Mostly because my voice is starting to go. I don't think I've ever talked this long for such a long period of time. It's already been, I think, 42 minutes. And yeah, my voice is starting to go. So I think that is it for the end of this stream. I'll probably do this again maybe next week or the week after that, depending on what topics I can come up with and whether or not my voice heals in time. But yeah, that is it for this live stream. Thank you all so much for showing up and showing your support. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful day filled with love, peace, and joy. And I will see you next time. Peace out, all of you.